I stared at my phone, watching Aunt Becky's name flash across the screen. For some reason, my thumb hovered over the answer button longer than it should have. Something in my gut told me to let it go to voicemail, but I pressed accept anyway. Lauren. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad I caught you. Her voice burst through the speaker with that familiar enthusiasm that used to make me smile. Today, it felt different. Too bright. Too forced. Hey, Aunt Becky. What's going on? I'm planning the most wonderful Christmas dinner this year. You absolutely have to come. Bring Tyler and Sarah too. It wouldn't be Christmas without my favorite niece. I shifted the phone to my other ear, walking toward my kitchen window. Snow had started to fall outside, coating the streets of Shaker Heights in white. That sounds nice. When were you thinking? Christmas Eve. I've already invited everyone. Your father would have wanted us all together, you know. Especially this year. It was. That strange emphasis on this year. Like she knew something I didn't. Is there a special reason? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Can't a woman just want to celebrate with her family? Besides, I've been meaning to catch up with Tyler and Sarah. I haven't seen them in months. Neither had I, really. Not properly. Tyler had been distant lately, always claiming he was busy with work. Sarah barely answered my texts anymore. When I did see them, there was this wall between us that hadn't existed before. Tyler would avoid eye contact, and Sarah would find excuses to cut our visits short. I'll talk to them and let you know, I said. Oh, don't be silly. I already called Tyler. He said yes. You're all coming. My stomach twisted. Tyler had agreed without asking me. We usually coordinated family events together. He knew I liked to plan ahead, especially during the holidays. He did. Yes. He was so excited. Said he had some news to share with everyone. Aunt Becky's voice dripped with something I couldn't quite place. Satisfaction. Anticipation. What kind of news? Oh, I shouldn't spoil it. You'll find out at dinner. I really must run, Lauren. So much to prepare. See you Christmas Eve at 6 sharp. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, staring at Tyler's contact. My finger moved to call him, but I stopped. Maybe I was overthinking this. Maybe the holidays were just making me paranoid. Tyler was my son. He wouldn't keep anything important from me. Except he had been acting strange for months now. It started around September. He'd stopped coming over for our usual Sunday dinners. When I'd call, he'd give one-word answers. Sarah was even worse. The woman who used to chat with me for hours about everything from recipes to reality TV shows now treated me like a stranger. I tried calling Tyler anyway. It went straight to voicemail. Hey, it's Mom. Aunt Becky just called about Christmas dinner. Call me back when you get this. 3 hours passed. No callback. I tried Sarah next. She answered on the 5th ring. Lauren. Hi. Her voice was flat, almost robotic. Hi, Sarah. I wanted to talk about Aunt Becky's dinner. Tyler hasn't called me back. He's busy. We'll be there. Is that all? The coldness in her tone hit me like ice water. This was the woman who used to call me Mom. Who'd cried happy tears at her wedding, telling me how grateful she was to be part of our family. Sarah, is everything okay? Between us, I mean. Silence stretched across the line. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her choosing her words carefully. Everything's fine. We'll see you Christmas Eve. Click. I sat down at my kitchen table, my hands shaking slightly. Something was wrong. Something had shifted in my family, and nobody was telling me what it was. Outside, the snow fell heavier. The neighbors' Christmas lights blinked cheerfully through the white curtain of flakes. Everyone else's holidays looked perfect from the outside. Mine felt like it was about to shatter. Christmas Eve arrived with clear skies and fresh snow covering everything in sight. I'd spent the morning baking cookies, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest since Aunt Becky's call. Maybe I'd imagined the tension. Maybe tonight would prove I'd been worrying over nothing. I pulled up to Aunt Becky's house at 5:45. The two-story colonial was decorated exactly how she did it every year: white lights along the roofline, a wreath on every window, and that oversized inflatable Santa on the front lawn that had seen better days. Tyler's car was already in the driveway. They'd arrived early. Without me. I grabbed the plate of cookies from my passenger seat and headed up the walk. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Aunt Becky stood there in a red sweater with silver bells dangling from it. Lauren. Right on time. She pulled me into a hug that felt just a second too long. When she pulled back, her eyes searched my face like she was looking for something specific. Come in, come in. Everyone's already here. I stepped inside, and the warmth of the house wrapped around me. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air. Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. Under any other circumstances, this would have felt like home. The living room was packed. Uncle Frank stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, talking to my cousin Michelle. Her husband, Derek, was helping their kids hang ornaments on the tree. Normal. Everything looked completely normal. Then I saw Tyler and Sarah on the couch. Tyler's leg bounced up and down, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. Sarah sat rigid beside him, her hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for bad news. When Tyler spotted me, his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, something else I couldn't name, before he forced a smile. Hey, Mom. I moved toward them, but Aunt Becky's hand on my arm stopped me. Let's get you some wine first. You look like you could use a drink. She practically dragged me toward the kitchen. I glanced back at Tyler. He'd already looked away. In the kitchen, Aunt Becky poured me a glass of red wine with hands that weren't quite steady. So glad you could make it. This dinner is going to be memorable. Very memorable. Aunt Becky, what's going on? Going on? Nothing. It's Christmas. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. She handed me the glass. Go mingle. Dinner will be ready soon. I returned to the living room, wine in hand. Tyler and Sarah were now standing near the window, having what looked like an intense whispered conversation. Sarah's face was flushed, and Tyler kept running his hand through his hair, another nervous tell. I walked over. Tyler, Sarah, can we talk? Actually, Mom, we were just... Tyler started. Dinner. Aunt Becky's voice rang out. Everyone to the table. The moment was gone. People started moving toward the dining room, and Tyler and Sarah disappeared into the crowd before I could stop them. The dining table looked beautiful. Candles flickered between serving dishes piled high with food. The good china gleamed under the chandelier. Aunt Becky had outdone herself. She directed everyone to their seats. I ended up across from Tyler and Sarah, with Aunt Becky at the head of the table to my right. Perfect positioning to watch everyone, I realized. Like she'd planned it that way. As plates were filled and conversation started up around us, I watched my son. He couldn't sit still. His eyes kept darting to Sarah, then to Aunt Becky, then to his plate. Sarah ate mechanically, bringing her fork to her mouth in measured movements that looked rehearsed. Tyler, I said, loud enough to be heard over the chatter. You mentioned you had news. The table went quiet. Tyler's fork clattered against his plate. That's not. He looked at Aunt Becky with something like panic in his eyes. Aunt Becky smiled serenely. Oh, let's not rush things. We have all night. She raised her wine glass. Let's toast first. To family, to truth, and to things that have been hidden far too long. The way she said hidden made my blood run cold. Uncle Frank raised his glass obliviously. To family. Everyone echoed the sentiment and drank. Everyone except Tyler, who stared at his glass like it contained poison. And Sarah, whose hand trembled as she brought her wine to her lips. I set down my glass and looked directly at my son. Tyler, what's going on? Before he could answer, Aunt Becky leaned forward, her smile growing wider. Tell me, "Lauren," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent table. "How are you enjoying that trust fund?" The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Trust fund. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. The Christmas music seemed too loud suddenly. The candles flickered, casting strange shadows across faces I'd known my entire life. "What?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Aunt Becky tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "The trust fund your father left you. The $500,000. Surely you've been enjoying it." My heart hammered against my ribs. Dad had died 3 years ago. I'd handled all his affairs myself, sorted through paperwork, met with lawyers, closed accounts. There had been no trust fund, just his modest savings, which barely covered the funeral expenses and outstanding bills. "I don't know what you're talking about." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Uncle Frank cleared his throat. Michelle suddenly became very interested in her mashed potatoes. But Aunt Becky's eyes never left my face, watching my confusion like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. "You don't know." She said it as a statement, not a question. Then she turned that unsettling gaze toward Tyler. "Interesting." I followed her line of sight. Tyler had gone pale, all the blood draining from his face until he looked like he might pass out. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "Tyler." My voice cracked on his name. He wouldn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on his plate, on the turkey he'd been pushing around for the past 10 minutes without taking a single bite. Sarah shifted beside him. She reached under the table, and I saw her hand find his. But it wasn't a comforting gesture. Her fingers dug into his palm like a warning, like she was telling him to keep his mouth shut. "There must be some mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad didn't have that kind of money. I went through everything when he passed. There was no trust fund." "Oh, but there was." Aunt Becky took a delicate sip of her wine. "Your father set it up 2 years before he died. Made me the trustee until it was time to release the funds. Which happened 6 months ago. On your birthday, actually." 6 months ago. My mind raced back. My birthday had been in June. Tyler and Sarah had taken me to dinner at that expensive steakhouse downtown. They'd insisted on paying, which had seemed odd at the time since Tyler always complained about money. Sarah had bought me a designer handbag I'd mentioned once in passing, something I'd never expected her to remember, let alone purchase. "Where did the money come from?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Your father was smarter with his investments than you realized. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. So he set up the trust, kept it quiet, told me to release it when you turned 55. Said you'd earned some peace after raising Tyler alone all those years." Taze pricked at my eyes. That sounded like Dad. Always planning ahead, always trying to protect me even from beyond the grave. But if the money had been released 6 months ago, why hadn't I received anything? Why hadn't anyone told me? I looked at Tyler again. A tear was sliding down his cheek now, and he was shaking, actually shaking. "Tyler." I said his name firmly this time. "Look at me." He raised his eyes slowly. The guilt there was so raw, so absolute, that I felt something crack inside my chest. "Mom," his voice broke. "Don't." Sarah's word was sharp as a knife. She finally looked at me, and the coldness in her expression stole my breath. This wasn't the woman who'd married my son. This was someone else entirely. Someone capable of things I didn't want to imagine. Aunt Becky leaned back in her chair, watching the three of us like we were actors in a play she directed. "I think it's time we all got honest. Don't you? No more secrets. No more lies." "I don't understand what's happening." My hands trembled as I set down my wine glass. Someone needs to explain this to me right now. Uncle Frank stood abruptly. Maybe we should give them some privacy. "Sit down, Frank." Aunt Becky's voice had lost all its sweetness. It was cold now, commanding. "Everyone stays. This involves all of us. We're family, after all." and family should witness the truth. Michelle's kids started to whimper. She ushered them quickly toward the living room, shooting me an apologetic look as she left. Derek followed, leaving just the adults at the table. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tyler's shoulders shook. Sarah's jaw clenched tighter, and Aunt Becky smiled that terrible smile, waiting for someone to break. I realized then that this dinner had never been about Christmas. It had been about this moment. Aunt Becky had orchestrated every detail, positioned every person, set the stage for whatever revelation was about to destroy my life. The trust fund was released to Tyler, Aunt Becky said softly. 6 months ago. Every penny of it. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. No. The word came out automatically, a reflex against something my brain refused to process. That's not possible. But even as I said it, pieces started clicking into place. Tyler's new car that he'd claimed was a great lease deal. The expensive vacation to Hawaii he and Sarah had taken in July. The way they'd suddenly stopped asking me for help with bills. Why would Dad give the money to Tyler? My voice sounded strange, disconnected. It was meant for me. You said it yourself, to take care of me. Aunt Becky's expression shifted, something almost like sympathy crossing her features. Almost. Your father made Tyler the beneficiary. He thought, well, he believed Tyler would do the right thing. That he'd share it with you, invest it wisely for your future. He trusted his grandson. The emphasis on that last word felt like a slap. I turned to Tyler. He was crying openly now, tears streaming down his face as he stared at the table. Tyler, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't take money that Dad left for me and keep it. It's more complicated than that, Sarah interjected, her voice defensive. We didn't just keep it. We invested it. Invested it. I felt something dangerous rising in my chest. In what? Without even telling me it existed. We were going to tell you, Tyler finally spoke, his voice thick with tears. I swear, Mom, we were. But then the opportunity came up, and we thought if we could double it, triple it even, then what? I cut him off. Then you'd be heroes? Then I'd thank you for gambling with my security. It wasn't gambling. Sarah's voice rose, sharp and defensive. It was a legitimate business opportunity. Tyler's friend from college was starting a tech company. He needed investors. The potential returns were. I don't care about the returns. I was standing now, though I didn't remember getting up. My chair had fallen backward, clattering against the hardwood floor. That money wasn't yours to invest. It wasn't yours to touch. How could you do this? Tyler flinched like I'd struck him. Mom, please. How much is left? My voice had gone quiet again, deadly calm. Of the $500,000, how much is left? The silence that followed answered my question before Tyler's broken whisper confirmed it. Nothing. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Nothing. I repeated, unable to comprehend. You lost $500,000. The company went under, Tyler said miserably. It was supposed to be a sure thing. Everyone said. Everyone. I laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. Who is everyone, Tyler? Who convinced my son to steal his grandmother's legacy and throw it away? We didn't steal it, Sarah said coldly. Legally, the money was Tyler's. Your father made him the beneficiary. We had every right. Don't you dare. I pointed at her, my hand shaking with rage. Don't you dare talk to me about rights. That money was meant to take care of me. Dad knew I'd been struggling. He knew my retirement fund was barely enough. And you. I looked at Tyler, feeling my heart break all over again. You knew too. You knew I was working extra shifts at the hospital. You knew I was worried about making ends meet. And you said nothing. I wanted to fix it first, Tyler sobbed. I thought if I could just get the money back, make it right, then you'd never have to know. I've been trying, Mom. I've been working on it. For 6 months. My voice cracked. You've been lying to me for 6 months. Aunt Becky had been quiet during this exchange, but now she leaned forward. It's actually been longer than that, Lauren. I looked at her sharply. What do you mean? Tyler knew about the trust fund for over a year. I told him when your father first passed. I explained that the money would be released on your 55th birthday, and that his grandfather expected him to handle it responsibly, to make sure you were taken care of. She paused, letting that sink in. He's had plenty of time to plan what he was going to do. The betrayal cut deeper. Tyler had known. For a year, he'd known about this money, known it was meant for me, and he'd planned to take it anyway. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do this to me? Tyler couldn't meet my eyes, but Sarah could. She looked at me with something I'd never seen directed at me before. Resentment. Because you've had your turn, Sarah said, her voice icy. You've lived your life. Tyler deserved a chance to build something for us, for our future. We're young. We have time to make it back. While I have nothing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You took my security, my father's last gift to me, because you thought you deserved it more. We thought we could make it work for everyone, Tyler said weakly, but Sarah shot him a look that silenced him. Uncle Frank shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should take a break. No. I held up my hand. I want to hear all of it. Right now. What else haven't you told me? Aunt Becky's smile returned, predatory and satisfied. She'd been waiting for this moment, I realized. She'd known exactly how this would unfold. Tell her about the house, Aunt Becky said softly. Tyler's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. Aunt Becky, please. What about the house? My voice had gone numb. Sarah's jaw set in a hard line. Tyler looked like he might be sick, and Aunt Becky leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in her lap like she'd just won a game I hadn't known we were playing. They put your house up as collateral, she said. When the business investment failed, they needed more money to try and recoup their losses. So they forged your signature and took out a loan against your home. The world stopped. My house. The house where I'd raised Tyler. Where his father and I had brought him home from the hospital. Where I'd nursed my husband through his final days before cancer took him. Where I'd cried myself to sleep after his funeral, with 5-year-old Tyler crawling into bed beside me, asking why Daddy wasn't coming back. The house my parents had helped me keep when money got tight. Where Dad had spent countless weekends fixing things, teaching Tyler how to use tools, how to be a man. Where Mom had hosted Sunday dinners until she got too sick to cook anymore. The only thing I had left that was truly mine. You're lying. But even as I said it, I knew she wasn't. The truth was written all over Tyler's face, that sick, guilty expression of someone caught in something unforgivable. Show her the papers, Aunt Becky said calmly, like she was asking someone to pass the salt. Tyler's hand shook as he pulled out his phone. He scrolled through something, then slid the device across the table toward me. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to push it away, to run from this room and pretend this conversation had never happened. But I looked. The document on the screen was a loan agreement. $150,000 borrowed against my property. And there, at the bottom, was my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close. Someone had practiced it carefully, but the loop on my L was wrong. The slant of my C didn't match. You forged my name. The words felt unreal leaving my mouth. You committed fraud. We didn't have a choice. Sarah's composure finally cracked. After the first investment failed, we were drowning. The people Tyler borrowed from, they weren't patient. They wanted their money back with interest, and they weren't asking nicely. Borrowed from? A new horror dawned. Tyler, who did you borrow from? He wouldn't answer, just sat there crying, looking younger than his 32 years. Private lenders, Aunt Becky supplied. The kind who don't care much about legal channels when they want to collect. Isn't that right, Tyler? You got involved with loan sharks. I couldn't process this. My son, my careful, cautious son who used to check the locks 3 times before bed, had borrowed money from criminals. It was supposed to be short-term. Tyler's voice rose defensively, just until the tech company took off. But then it didn't, and they wanted their money, and we couldn't. Mom, they were threatening us. So you stole from me. I felt something inside me turning to ice. You put my home at risk because you made bad decisions. We were trying to protect you. Sarah stood up, her chair scraping loudly. If those men had come after us, they would have come after you too. Your family. They would have used you to get to us. So instead, you used me first. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. How thoughtful. Lauren, Uncle Frank tried to interject. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me this will blow over. My son stole $500,000 from me and put my home up as collateral to cover his gambling debts with criminals. There's nothing calm about this situation. I turned back to Tyler. When is the loan due? He swallowed hard. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. My voice climbed an octave. It's almost Christmas. You've had 6 months, and you wait until now to. I stopped, realization hitting me like a freight train. You weren't going to tell me, were you? You were going to let them take my house, and I'd come home one day to find eviction papers, and you'd act surprised. No. Tyler reached across the table toward me, but I jerked back. Mom, no, I swear. I was going to tell you. Tonight. That's why I agreed to come to this dinner. I thought with family around, I could explain everything, and maybe I wouldn't make a scene. I laughed bitterly. Maybe I'd just forgive you because it's Christmas and family forgives family? Is that what you thought? I thought you'd understand that I made a mistake. Tyler's tears turned angry. I'm your son. I'm not perfect. I screwed up, okay? But I was trying to make something of myself, trying to build a future where I wouldn't have to struggle like you did. Like I did. The words hit me like a physical blow. You think I struggled because I was stupid? Because I made bad choices? Tyler, I struggled because your father died and left me with a mortgage and a 5-year-old and medical bills that took 10 years to pay off. I struggled because I worked double shifts to make sure you had everything you needed. I struggled so you wouldn't have to. And look how that turned out. Sarah's voice was vicious. You worked yourself to the bone, and what do you have to show for it? A tiny retirement fund and a house that's falling apart. Tyler saw an opportunity to break that cycle, to actually build wealth instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. On my dime. I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. You don't get to play venture capitalist with someone else's life savings. You don't get to risk everything I've worked for because you wanted to take a shortcut. It wasn't a shortcut, Tyler said miserably. It was supposed to be smart investing. Smart investing. I wanted to scream. Smart investing is diversification. It's research. It's consulting with professionals. It's not throwing $500,000 at your college buddy's startup and praying for the best. Aunt Becky had been watching this entire exchange with rapt attention. Now she spoke up, her voice cutting through the chaos. There's more, Lauren. I didn't think I could take any more. My legs felt weak. My chest hurt. But I forced myself to ask, what else? The house loan isn't the only one. Tyler and Sarah took out credit cards in your name. 3 of them. They maxed them out trying to recoup the losses. Tyler buried his face in his hands. Sarah's expression had gone blank, like she'd retreated somewhere deep inside herself where none of this could touch her. How much? My voice was a whisper now. $75,000, Aunt Becky said. Give or take. I did the math quickly. The trust fund, $500,000. The house loan, $150,000. The credit cards, $75,000. My son had put me $750,000 in debt. At 55 years old, working as a nurse with no husband and a modest retirement fund, I would never recover from this. You've destroyed me, I said quietly. You've destroyed my entire future. Tyler looked up, his face ravaged by tears. Mom, I'll fix this. I promise. I'll get a second job. How? I cut him off. How will you fix this, Tyler? You can't even keep the first job you have. Sarah hasn't worked in 2 years. Where is this money going to come from? The silence that followed was damning. That's what I thought. I pushed back from the table, every movement feeling like I was moving through concrete. I need to leave. Lauren, wait, Aunt Becky started. Why? I turned on her, all the rage I'd been holding back finally breaking through. So you can drop another bomb. Tell me about some other way my son has ruined my life? You knew about all of this, didn't you? You've known for months, and you said nothing. You let me walk around oblivious while my whole world fell apart. I wanted you to hear it from them, Aunt Becky said. I wanted Tyler to be man enough to confess what he'd done. But he's not, is he? He's a coward, just like his father was. Don't you talk about my husband, I said coldly. Someone has to tell you the truth. Aunt Becky stood now, her voice rising. Your whole life, you've made excuses for the men around you. Your husband who left you with nothing. Your father who was too proud to ask for help. And now Tyler, who's following right in their footsteps. When are you going to stop being a doormat? The slap came before I realized I'd raised my hand. My palm connected with Aunt Becky's cheek with a crack that echoed through the dining room. Everyone froze. How dare you? I breathed. How dare you use this nightmare, to settle whatever score you have with my family? You don't know anything about my husband. You don't know anything about my father. And you clearly don't know anything about loyalty, or you would have told me the truth months ago. I grabbed my purse from where I'd left it by my chair. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Mom, please don't go, Tyler begged. We need to figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my son's face. You made your choices. Now you live with them. Both of you. I walked toward the door, my vision blurring with tears. Behind me, I heard Tyler sob, heard Sarah hiss something at him, heard Aunt Becky's cold laughter. Running away won't solve anything. Aunt Becky called after me. I stopped at the doorway, not turning around. Neither will staying here with people who've been lying to me for months. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope it was worth it. The cold air hit me like a wall when I stepped outside. Snow had started falling again, soft and silent. The neighborhood was peaceful, glowing with Christmas lights and warmth and families who probably weren't falling apart at the seams. I made it to my car before I completely broke down. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes before I realized I had nowhere to go. Home felt like a trap now, a place that might not even be mine in 2 weeks. I couldn't face those walls, couldn't walk through rooms that held memories of a family that no longer existed. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting red and blue shadows across the snow. Through the window, I could see a tired waitress refilling coffee for the only other customers, a couple of truckers grabbing a late dinner. My phone had been ringing nonstop. Tyler's name flashed across the screen again and again. Sarah called twice. Even Aunt Becky tried once. I ignored them all. Finally, I turned the phone off and just sat there in my car, watching the snow accumulate on my windshield. Each flake that landed felt like another piece of my life disintegrating. How had I missed this? There must have been signs. But when I thought back over the past 6 months, all I could remember was being busy. Work had been demanding. We'd been understaffed at the hospital, and I'd picked up extra shifts to pad my savings. I'd been tired. I hadn't been paying attention. No, that wasn't fair to myself. I had been paying attention. I'd noticed Tyler's distance. I'd asked questions. But every time I tried to dig deeper, he'd deflected. He'd lied. And I'd trusted him because he was my son. And you're supposed to be able to trust your children. A knock on my window made me jump. A police officer stood outside, his flashlight pointed at the ground so it wouldn't blind me. I rolled down the window, cold air rushing in. Evening. You okay? Was I okay? I almost laughed. I'm fine, officer. Just taking a moment. He studied me with practiced eyes that had probably seen every kind of human misery. Been sitting here a while. You sure you're all right to drive? I haven't been drinking. Wasn't suggesting you were. But it's Christmas Eve, and you're crying in a parking lot. Makes a person wonder if everything's okay at home. The kindness in his voice almost broke me again. Home is complicated right now. He nodded slowly. Family stuff. You could say that. You got somewhere safe to go? Friend's house? Hotel? I hadn't thought about that. Where would I go? My closest friends were Sarah's mom, Janet, who would definitely take her daughter's side, and my coworker Maria, who was spending Christmas with her own family in Cleveland. I had colleagues and acquaintances, but no one I could call at 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve and dump this mess on. I'll figure something out, I said. The officer pulled out a business card and handed it to me. There's a women's shelter number on the back. Not suggesting you need it, but they also have counselors available 24/7. Sometimes talking to a stranger helps. I took the card, touched by his concern. Thank you. He tapped the roof of my car gently. Merry Christmas. Drive safe. I watched him walk back to his patrol car and pull away. Then I sat there for another 10 minutes before finally starting my engine. The roads were getting worse, snow falling heavier now. I needed to make a decision. I drove to a hotel near the highway, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour or the week, when nobody asked questions and the sheets were clean but worn thin. The clerk barely looked up when I requested a room, just took my credit card and slid a key across the counter. The room was exactly what I expected, bland, impersonal, with that faint smell of industrial cleaning products that never quite masked the odor of thousands of previous guests. But it was quiet, and it was mine for the night, and that was enough. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls. 23 text messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I opened my banking app. My checking account showed the usual amount, enough to cover my bills for the month, plus a small cushion. My savings account had $12,000, built up painstakingly over years of careful budgeting. My retirement fund through the hospital had maybe $85,000, though I'd stopped checking the exact amount because watching it grow so slowly was depressing. That was it. That was everything I had in the world. And according to what I'd learned tonight, I owed $225,000 between the house loan and the credit cards. Money I'd never borrowed. Debt I'd never agreed to take on. I pulled up the credit card company website and created an account. It took 3 tries to get my information right. Apparently, Tyler and Sarah had used my maiden name on one of the cards. When I finally got access, seeing the statements made me physically ill. Luxury hotels in Miami. Designer clothes from boutiques I'd never heard of. A $3,000 charge at a jewelry store. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd lived it up while doing it. Every expensive dinner, every first-class upgrade, every indulgence had been bought with my future. One charge in particular caught my eye. $8,500 to a high-end fertility clinic. Sarah had been talking about wanting kids. I'd encouraged her, excited about the prospect of being a grandmother. But she'd always said they were waiting until they were more financially stable. They were trying to have a baby with my stolen money. I closed the laptop before I threw it across the room. My hands were shaking again, rage and grief warring inside me until I couldn't tell which emotion was which anymore. A text message notification popped up on my phone. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Tyler, Mom, please, just let me explain everything. It's not as bad as it seems. Not as bad? I typed back before I could stop myself. You stole from me. You committed fraud. You put my home at risk. Exactly which part isn't as bad as it seems? The response came within seconds. We can fix this. Just give me a chance. I stared at those words for a long time. Part of me, the mother part that had kissed skinned knees and chased away nightmares, wanted to believe him. Wanted to find a way to make this right. To rebuild what had been broken. But the rest of me knew better. Tyler wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he got caught. If Aunt Becky hadn't orchestrated that dinner, hadn't forced the truth into the open, I might never have known. I would have lost my house and wondered what happened, and Tyler would have let me believe it was my own fault somehow. I turned the phone off again and lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Somewhere in this city, people were wrapping presents and hanging stockings and believing in the magic of Christmas. Somewhere, families were intact and trust still meant something. But not in my family. Not anymore. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in the hotel bed watching the digital clock tick through the hours, 11:47, 12:03, 1:29, each minute feeling like an eternity. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's guilty face, heard Sarah's cold justifications, felt the weight of Aunt Becky's revelations crushing down on me. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to rest and sat at the small desk by the window. Snow continued falling, covering the parking lot in pristine white. It would be a beautiful Christmas morning. People would wake up excited, grateful, surrounded by love. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos. There was Tyler at 6, missing his front teeth, grinning at the camera while holding up a toy truck. Tyler at 10, gangly and awkward in his Little League uniform. Tyler at 13, trying to look tough but unable to hide his excitement about his first school dance. Tyler at 18, the day he left for college. I remembered that morning so clearly. How he'd hugged me tight and promised to make me proud. How I'd cried watching his car disappear down the street, not because I was sad but because I was so sure he was going to do amazing things. When had it gone wrong? When had my sweet boy turned into someone who could look me in the eye and lie? Who could steal from his own mother without losing sleep? Or maybe he had lost sleep. Maybe that's why he'd been so distant these past months. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and couldn't face what he'd done. No. I stopped that thought before it could take root. I couldn't make excuses for him. That's what I'd always done, according to Aunt Becky. Made excuses. Smoothed things over, taken the blame when things went wrong so my son didn't have to feel the full weight of his mistakes. My husband used to tell me I was too soft on Tyler. You'll spoil him, he'd say. A boy needs discipline. But then he got sick, and discipline became the last thing on my mind. I just wanted Tyler to be happy, to not lose his childhood to cancer treatments and hospital visits and watching his father waste away. After the funeral, I tried to be both parents. Tried to give Tyler structure while also giving him grace. Tried to teach him responsibility while also protecting him from adult worries. Had I failed? Had my attempts to shield him from hardship actually made him weaker? A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. Tyler was 16. He'd borrowed my car without asking and dented the fender backing out of a friend's driveway. When I found out, he'd cried and apologized, swearing it would never happen again. The repair cost $800 I didn't have, but I paid it anyway. Told him we all make mistakes, that the important thing was learning from them. 2 months later, he'd done it again. Different car, different friend's driveway, same excuse. I paid for that repair too. What lesson had I taught him? That there were no real consequences. That mom would always clean up his messes. The pattern had continued through college. Overdrafted bank account. I'd covered it. Lost his security deposit because he'd damaged the apartment. I'd paid it. Couldn't afford textbooks because he'd spent his book money on a spring break trip. I'd bought them. Every time, I'd told myself I was helping him. Being supportive. Making sure he could focus on his education instead of worrying about money. But maybe what I'd really been doing was teaching him that other people's resources were his to use. That taking without asking was acceptable if you had good intentions. Sarah had enabled him to, clearly. Or maybe she'd been the driving force. I thought back to their wedding 5 years ago. Sarah had wanted everything perfect. The expensive venue, the designer dress, the elaborate reception. Tyler had looked stressed about the cost, but Sarah had insisted. "It's our day," she'd said. "We deserve to celebrate." They'd gone $30,000 into debt for that wedding. I'd helped where I could, paying for the rehearsal dinner and some of the flowers. But I'd thought the debt would teach them something about living within their means. Instead, it seemed to have taught them that debt was just a tool, that you could always find more money somewhere if you needed it, even if that somewhere was your mother-in-law's stolen inheritance. A text message lit up my dark phone screen. Not Tyler this time. Aunt Becky. Aunt Becky, you're stronger than you think, Lauren. Don't let them break you. I stared at those words, anger rising fresh. Who was she to offer me encouragement? She'd sat on this information for months, watching me struggle, knowing what was coming, and said nothing. She'd set up that dinner like it was theater, like my devastation was entertainment. Me, why didn't you tell me sooner? The response came quickly. She must have been awake too. Aunt Becky, because I needed proof. Tyler's been covering his tracks carefully. I had to wait until the bills came due, until there was no way for him to lie his way out. If I'd told you sooner, he would have convinced you I was wrong. You would have believed him over me. She was right, and I hated her for it. If she'd come to me 2 months ago, or even 2 weeks ago, claiming Tyler had stolen from me, I would have defended him. I would have accused her of being jealous or vindictive or mistaken. Tyler was my son. Sons don't betray their mothers like that. Except mine had. Me, you could have given me time to prepare. To protect myself. Aunt Becky, there was no protecting you, Lauren. The damage was done the moment Tyler took that money. All I could do was make sure you found out before you lost your house. Now you have 2 weeks to fight back. Fight back. The phrase felt foreign. I wasn't a fighter. I was a mother, a widow who'd survived by keeping her head down and working hard. I didn't know how to fight my own son. Me, I don't know what to do. Aunt Becky, yes, you do. You're just afraid to do it. I set the phone down and walked to the window. Dawn was starting to break, turning the snow pink and gold. Christmas morning. Families would be waking up soon, children running to see what Santa had brought. Tyler and Sarah were probably still asleep, or maybe they were lying awake too, wondering what I was going to do. What was I going to do? The logical part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through nursing school and single motherhood and all the other challenges life had thrown at me, knew exactly what needed to happen. I needed to report the fraud, press charges, get the police involved, protect my assets and my credit before Tyler could do any more damage. But pressing charges meant my son could go to jail. It meant putting Sarah in legal jeopardy too. It meant airing our family's dirty laundry for everyone to see. It meant accepting that my relationship with Tyler might never recover. Could I do that? Could I destroy my son to save myself? The sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. A new day, a new reality. My old life, the one where I trusted my family and believed in happy endings, was gone. This new life, whatever it looked like, was going to require different choices. Harder choices. My phone rang. Tyler's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I listened to his message. Mom, it's Christmas. Please, can we just talk? I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But you're still my mom, and I'm still your son. That has to count for something. Please, please call me back. His voice broke at the end, and despite everything, I felt my heart crack a little more. That was the problem, wasn't it? He was still my son. I was still his mother. And somewhere deep inside me, in that place where logic couldn't reach, I still wanted to protect him. Still wanted to believe this could be fixed. But Aunt Becky's words echoed in my mind. You've been making excuses your whole life. Maybe it was time to stop. I picked up my phone and opened a new browser window. Typed in How to report identity theft and fraud. The first step was calling the police. I sat in the hotel room with my laptop open, the police non-emergency number pulled up on my phone screen. My finger hovered over the call button, but something held me back. Once I made this call, there was no taking it back. Tyler would have a criminal record. Sarah too. My son would be a felon. But as I sat there, paralyzed by indecision, a different thought crept in. Something about last night didn't add up. Aunt Becky had known about the trust fund for months. She'd watched Tyler and Sarah spend the money, forge documents, rack up debt in my name. And she'd done nothing. She claimed she was waiting for proof, waiting for the right moment to expose them. But why orchestrate such a public reveal? Why invite the whole family to witness my humiliation? If she really cared about protecting me, she could have pulled me aside privately, shown me the documents, given me time to process and plan. Instead, she turned my devastation into dinner theater. I pulled up my email and started searching. Dad's lawyer had sent me copies of his will and estate documents 3 years ago. I'd skimmed them at the time, grieving and overwhelmed, but I'd never read them carefully. Now I opened each attachment methodically, looking for any mention of a trust fund. It took an hour of searching before I found it. A separate document, buried in a folder I'd labeled miscellaneous. The trust agreement, dated 2 years before Dad's death, establishing a $500,000 fund to be released to me on my 55th birthday. But the document had been modified. I could see the revision history in the file properties. The last change had been made 8 months ago, 2 months before the money was released. I wasn't a legal expert, but I knew enough to recognize that trustees couldn't just modify trust documents without proper authority. I pulled up the revision and compared it to the original. The change was subtle but significant. In the original document, I was listed as the direct beneficiary. The money was to be deposited into an account in my name, with me receiving notification from the bank. In the revised version, Tyler was listed as the intermediary recipient, with instructions to distribute funds appropriately to ensure Lauren Carter's long-term financial security. That vague language gave Tyler legal cover. He could argue he was investing the money for my benefit, that he was following the trust's directive to ensure my financial security. It would be his word against mine about whether I'd been informed. And the person who'd made that revision? According to the document properties, it had been created on a computer registered to Rebecca Morrison, Aunt Becky. My hand started shaking. I read through the document again, looking for anything I'd missed. Then I pulled up the original trust agreement and photographed both versions with my phone. Why would Aunt Becky change the terms of the trust? What did she gain from putting Tyler in control of the money instead of me? I opened a new browser tab and started researching. What I found made my stomach turn. As trustee, Aunt Becky was entitled to compensation, a percentage of the trust's value for managing it. In the original document, that compensation was capped at 2%, or $10,000. But trustees could also claim extraordinary expenses for complex trust administration. And if a trust required ongoing management, like if the money was being invested rather than directly distributed, those fees could be substantially higher. I pulled up my bank statements and started searching for any unusual transactions. Nothing stood out at first. Then I remembered Dad had set up a small checking account years ago that he'd used for miscellaneous expenses. I'd never closed it, just let it sit with a minimal balance. I logged into that account and felt the floor drop out from under me. Over the past 8 months, there had been regular withdrawals. $5,000 here, $3,000 there. Small enough not to trigger alerts, but adding up to nearly $40,000. Each withdrawal was labeled Trust Administration Fee R. Morrison. Aunt Becky had been paying herself from Dad's estate, not the trust fund itself, but from other accounts she had access to as executor. Money that should have been part of my inheritance. I grabbed my phone and called Dad's lawyer. It was Christmas morning, but I left a detailed voicemail explaining what I'd found and asking him to call me back immediately. Then I started digging deeper into Aunt Becky's finances. It felt wrong, invasive, but I was past caring about propriety. I pulled up property records, business registrations, anything public I could access. What I found was a pattern. 3 years ago, right after Dad's death, Aunt Becky had been in serious financial trouble. Her husband, Uncle Frank, had lost his job. They'd taken out a second mortgage on their house. Credit card debt was piling up. Then, suddenly, 8 months ago, right when the trust fund was released, their fortunes had reversed. They'd paid off their second mortgage, bought a new car. Uncle Frank had started a consulting business that required significant startup capital. I pulled up Tyler's social media, something I rarely did. Scrolled back to June, when the trust money was released. There were photos of him and Sarah at expensive restaurants. A post about their Hawaii trip with the caption, "Thanks to Aunt Becky for the amazing investment advice." Investment advice. I clicked through to the comments. Sarah had replied, "Best family dinner ever. So grateful for your guidance." My chest tightened. I went back further, searching for any mention of Aunt Becky. There were photos of the four of them together, Tyler, Sarah, Aunt Becky, and Uncle Frank, at what looked like business dinners. The dates ranged from 7 months ago to just 2 weeks before Christmas. They'd been meeting regularly, planning together, and I'd known nothing about it. One more search. I looked up the tech company Tyler claimed to have invested in. Found the business registration, the articles of incorporation. Listed among the founding partners, Frank Morrison. Uncle Frank. The company Tyler had thrown my inheritance at was Uncle Frank's venture. And when it failed, if it had even really failed, where had the money actually gone? I thought about Aunt Becky's performance last night. The way she'd revealed each piece of information like she was peeling back layers of an onion. How she positioned herself as my defender, the truth-teller exposing my son's betrayal. But she'd orchestrated the whole thing. She'd changed the trust documents to put Tyler in control. She'd advised him on what to do with the money. She'd probably encouraged the investment in Uncle Frank's company, taking a cut for herself along the way. And when it all fell apart, or when she decided it was time to cut ties and protect herself, she'd set up that dinner to make sure Tyler took all the blame. My phone rang. Dad's lawyer. "Mrs. Carter, I got your message. I'm with family right now, but this sounds urgent. What's going on?" I explained everything as clearly as I could. The modified trust documents, the fees Aunt Becky had paid herself, the connection to Uncle Frank's company. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "Mrs. Carter, I need to be very clear with you. If what you're saying is accurate, your aunt has committed serious crimes. Trustee fraud, embezzlement, possibly conspiracy. These aren't civil matters, they're criminal." "I know. This will destroy your family." "It's already destroyed." My voice was steady now. "I just want to know the truth. Can you look into this? Officially. I'll need you to file a formal complaint. Come to my office Monday morning. Bring everything you've found. In the meantime, don't confront your aunt. Don't let her know you're investigating. If she suspects you onto her, she'll cover her tracks." Too late for that. I'd already sent Aunt Becky those text messages. She knew I was suspicious. After I hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen. The woman who'd helped raise me after Mom died. Who'd hosted every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering. Who'd held my hand at Dad's funeral and promised we'd get through it together. That woman had stolen from me. Had manipulated my son into being her accomplice. Had stood by watching as my life fell apart, waiting for the perfect moment to position herself as the hero while ensuring all the blame landed on Tyler. A new text appeared on my phone. "Aunt Becky again. Aunt Becky, we need to talk. In person. There are things about your father you don't know. Things that explain everything." My father. What did Dad have to do with any of this? Another message. "Come to my house at noon. Come alone. If you want the truth, Lauren, really want it, you'll come." I looked at the clock. It was 9:47 a.m. I had 2 hours to decide whether to walk into what might be a trap. But I needed answers. And clearly, Aunt Becky was ready to give them. I pulled up to Aunt Becky's house at exactly noon. The Christmas decorations that had looked festive 2 nights ago now seemed garish in the harsh daylight. That inflatable Santa leered at me from the snow-covered lawn. Tyler's car was gone. So was Uncle Frank's truck. Only Aunt Becky's sedan sat in the driveway. She'd made sure we'd be alone. I sat in my car for a full minute, debating whether to go in. I tucked my phone in my pocket, recording app ready to go. Whatever she was about to tell me, I wanted proof. Before I could second-guess myself, the front door opened. Aunt Becky stood there in jeans and a sweater, looking nothing like the theatrical puppet master from Christmas Eve. She looked tired, almost fragile. "Are you coming in, or are you going to sit in your car all day?" I got out and walked to the door, every muscle tense. She stepped aside to let me pass, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, the same one she'd worn for as long as I could remember. The scent triggered 1,000 memories, her teaching me to bake, helping me pick out my wedding dress, holding me while I sobbed at my husband's funeral. How much of that had been real? The house was quiet, too quiet. The remains of Christmas dinner still sat on the dining room table. Plates scraped clean, wine glasses with dried red residue at bottom. She hadn't cleaned up. That wasn't like her. "Where's Uncle Frank?" I asked. "I sent him to his sister's. We need privacy for this conversation." She gestured to the couch. "Sit." "I'll stand." She shrugged and sat down herself, folding her hands in her lap. "Suit yourself. I imagine you've been busy this morning, digging through records, making phone calls. You were always thorough like that." "You changed the trust documents." "Yes." The casual admission startled me. "You embezzled money from Dad's estate." "Also yes." "You advised Tyler to invest in Uncle Frank's company, knowing it would fail." "That's more complicated, but essentially correct." I stared at her, unable to process how calmly she was confessing to crimes that could send her to prison. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know the truth. The whole truth, not just the pieces you figured out." She leaned back against the couch cushions. "Your father was a liar, Lauren. A cheat and a liar, and I'm tired of protecting his memory." "Don't you dare." "He had an affair." Her words cut through my anger like a knife through butter. "With my sister, your mother's sister, for 5 years before she died." The room tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "You're lying." "Am I?" She pulled out her phone and held it up. On the screen was a photo I'd never seen. My father and a woman I barely recognized. My mother's younger sister, Diane, who'd moved to California before I was born and rarely visited. They were sitting close together at what looked like a restaurant, his hand covering haze on the table. The intimacy in the image was undeniable. "That doesn't prove." "I have hundreds more. Photos, emails, hotel receipts. Your father kept everything, like he was proud of it. I found it all when I was going through his things after he died. You were too grief-stricken to notice what I was boxing up." She swiped through several more images, each one more damning than the last. They were planning to leave. Your father was going to divorce your mother and move to California to be with Diane. Then your mother got sick, and suddenly leaving looked bad. So he stayed, played the devoted husband, let everyone think he was a saint. I felt like I was drowning. Mom knew. Of course she knew. Why do you think she was so sad all the time? Why do you think she gave up? Cancer didn't kill your mother, Lauren. Heartbreak did. Your father destroyed her spirit long before the disease destroyed her body. Stop. My voice broke. Just stop. You wanted the truth. Aunt Becky's expression was cold, clinical. Your father wasn't the man you thought he was. He was selfish and cruel. And that trust fund, that wasn't love. That was guilt money. His way of easing his conscience for all the ways he failed you. So you decided to steal it. Anger cut through my grief. You decided you deserved it more than I did. I decided I'd earned it. She stood up now, facing me. I was the one who held your mother's hand when she was dying. Not your father, he was too busy with Diane. I was the one who helped you raise Tyler after your husband died. Where was your father then? Off on his business trips that were really visits to his mistress. I gave you everything, Lauren. I held this family together while he tore it apart. So yes, when I saw that trust fund, I thought about what I was owed. You weren't owed anything. That was my inheritance. Your inheritance from a man who didn't deserve your love. Her voice rose, finally showing real emotion. Do you know how it felt? Watching you worship him. Watching you cry at his funeral like he was some kind of hero. I wanted to scream the truth at you, but you were already so broken. So I kept his secrets, protected his memory, suffered in silence. So this is revenge. I laughed bitterly. You stole from me to get back at a dead man. I took what I was owed, and I used your son to do it because he was weak enough to be used, just like his grandfather. She moved closer, her eyes hard. Tyler knew exactly what he was doing, Lauren. I didn't force him. I simply showed him an opportunity and watched him take it. The fact that he chose money over loyalty to you? That's not my fault. That's who he is. You manipulated him. I gave him a choice. He made it. She crossed her arms. And now you have to make yours. What choice is that? You can report me, press charges, drag all of this through court, where every ugly secret will become public record. Everyone will know about your father's affair, about your mother's heartbreak, about how your perfect little family was built on lies. She paused, letting that sink in. Or you can walk away. Tyler takes the fall for the fraud. He's the one who forged your signature, after all. I'll quietly repay what I took from the estate. We never speak of this again, and your father's reputation stays intact. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a deal. There's a difference. I looked at this woman who I'd trusted my entire life. Really looked at her. The resemblance to my mother was striking. Same eyes, same bone structure. But where Mom had been soft and kind, Aunt Becky was sharp and calculating. Had she always been this person? Or had years of swallowing resentment twisted her into someone unrecognizable? What about Tyler? I asked quietly. What about him? He's an adult. He made his choices. If you want to forgive him, that's your business. But he committed fraud, Lauren. Real, prosecutable fraud. If you go to the police about me, I'll make sure they know every detail of what he did. He'll go to prison. And if I don't report you, then it's just family drama. Tyler says he made a bad investment with money he thought was his to manage. You're angry, but you work it out privately. No police, no charges, no permanent records. I thought about Tyler, about the little boy in those photos on my phone, the teenager who'd cried at his father's funeral, the young man who'd promised to make me proud. And I thought about Dad. All those memories I'd cherished. Were any of them real? Or had I been loving a ghost, a fiction created to hide an affair? I need proof, I said finally. Everything you have on Dad. Every photo, every email, every document. I want it all. Aunt Becky smiled. I thought you might. It's already uploaded to a cloud drive. I'll send you the link. She pulled out her phone and typed something. Mine buzzed with a notification. Everything's there. Read it. Process it. Decide what you want to do. And the money you took from the estate. I'll have it back in your account by the end of the month. Consider it a loan I'm repaying with interest. That's not how loans work. You stole it. Semantics. She moved toward the door, clearly done with this conversation. You have until Monday to decide. Press charges or walk away. But know this, whatever you choose, your relationship with Tyler is probably over. He knows I have evidence against him. He knows I could have him arrested with a single phone call. He'll never forgive you for putting him in that position. He put himself in that position. Maybe, but he's not going to see it that way. She opened the front door, cold air rushing in. Merry Christmas, Lauren. I hope you find what you're looking for in those files. I walked out in a daze, barely feeling the cold. My car was running on autopilot as I drove back to the hotel. Once inside my room, I opened the cloud link Aunt Becky had sent. Hundreds of files, photos spanning years, email threads with subject lines that made me nauseous. Missing you. When can we see each other again? I wish things were different. I opened one email at random. Dad's words filled the screen. Lauren's graduation is next week. I have to be there, but all I can think about is being with you instead. This double life is killing me. I slammed the laptop shut and ran to the bathroom, where I vomited until there was nothing left. My father, my hero, the man who taught me to ride a bike and help with my homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding. He'd been living a lie the entire time. And Aunt Becky, bitter, manipulative Aunt Becky, had known all along, had watched me grieve, had let me build my entire identity around being my father's daughter, knowing the truth would shatter me. She'd waited years for this moment, years to deliver this revenge. I lay on the bathroom floor, tears streaming down my face, and realized I had no idea who anyone in my family really was, including myself. If you would love to hear the part 2 of this story, please drop it in the comment and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.